Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellencies, dear friends. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome and thank you for joining us from all around the world to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women. I'm Gabriella Wright, I'm an actor and an activist, and I will be moderating today's program. So given we are in a virtual space, a few housekeeping rules are in order. The event is being interpreted in Arabic, French, and Spanish, so please take a moment to select your language of preference in the lower right corner by clicking on the globe sign. In addition, the event will have subtitles throughout and an international sign language interpreter. Lastly, you can tweet any questions, comments, and best wishes you have to the UN Trust Fund by using the hashtag UNTF25. What a better way to start the 25th anniversary event than with a special message from the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres.
Excellencies, dear friends, the many crises facing our world today, from conflict to climate disruption and the COVID-19 pandemic, are linked to rising violence against women and girls. Events from Afghanistan to Haiti are increasing insecurity for women. Everywhere, COVID-19 has led to a shadow pandemic of violence against women and girls. For 25 years, the United Nations Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women has played an important role as the only global grant-making mechanism exclusively dedicated to eradicating this scourge. I congratulate you on your record of support for over 600 initiatives led by civil society in 140 countries and territories. This is a testament to the commitment of all those concerned, including member states, civil society, and particularly women's rights advocates and organizations. We must build on this work to strengthen multilateral partnerships and increase support and funding for civil society so that every woman and girl can live free from violence. Thank you, and I send warm wishes for a successful anniversary event.
Thank you, Secretary General, for this potent call to unity towards the shared goal, ending violence against women and girls. I'd like to welcome now UN Women's Under-Secretary General and Executive Director, Sima Sami Bahous.
Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. 25 years ago, in the wake of unprecedented international support for gender equality in the shape of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, the UN General Assembly established the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women. This new grant-giving mechanism led the way to inform and accelerate the UN system's efforts to end violence against women and girls. To date, it remains the only such global grant-making mechanism exclusively dedicated to this purpose. UN Women is proud to administer the UN Trust Fund, and I warmly thank all of the organizations, partners, donors, and supporters that have contributed to this 25-year journey. The fund is set apart not only by its dedicated focus, but by its critical insight into the role of civil society in this work. Since 1996, it has supported more than 600 initiatives, implemented mostly by women's rights organizations across 140 countries and territories worldwide, with grants totaling $198 million. Because the grants are demand-driven, the initiatives directly address the lived realities of women and girls at the local level, especially those who face intersecting forms of discrimination and those who are most at risk of being left behind. This is a prerequisite for building resilient societies that are free from violence against women and girls. This work has become even more pressing in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, during which reported violence against women and girls has risen sharply concurrently with the shrinking of civic space. Helplines and shelters run by local groups have often been the first and most direct responders to the needs of women and girl survivors of violence seeking support and justice. Let me therefore use this opportunity also to thank civil society and women's rights organizations for their persistent and relentless pursuit of a gender-equal world that is free from violence. Your activism, knowledge, and expertise have driven transformative change for decades and we are proud to share this path with you. My heartfelt congratulations to the UN Trust Fund for all its achievements thus far. In the current context of multiple gender crises, our mission of finding solutions to ending violence against women is now more pressing than ever. Generation equality, with its focus on multi-generational, multi-stakeholder action, has boosted our hope that change is possible. Now, more than ever, is the time to make equality a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Under-Secretary General, for these important words on the key role of women's rights and civil society organizations and their direct impact on the lives of women and girls around the world. Let's see a snapshot of their endeavors in changing lives of women and girls with the support of the UN Trust Fund since 1996. This will be followed by the remarks of one of the most vocal voices for establishing the fund in response to the Beijing Declaration for Action, Charlotte Bunch, founding director and senior scholar at the Center for Women's Global Leadership at Rutgers University.
Violence against women and girls has no geographic boundaries, no race, no ethnicity, or economic status. It is a pandemic of global proportions, which is deeply rooted in gender inequity.
There's a culture of violence that is very deeply ingrained in our societies, and we all have the responsibility to address it.
For 25 years, the UN Trust Fund has focused on one mission: to end violence against women and girls. Today, our work remains crucial. Violence against women and girls is still the most widespread human rights violation globally. 1 in 3 women will experience physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. Every day, 137 women are killed by a relative. At least 200 million girls and women aged 15 to 49 have undergone female genital mutilation. Concerningly, less than 40% of women who experience violence seek help. Since 1996, the UN Trust Fund has supported more than 600 civil society and women's rights organizations around the world, investing $200 million in solutions to prevent and end violence against women and girls. In the past 5 years alone, these projects have already reached 54.6 million of people, provided services to 1.6 million women and girls, and engaged with hundreds of thousands of communities. 25 years on, the UN Trust Fund's lifeline support is more needed than ever. During the COVID-19 pandemic, lockdown measures led to an alarming rise in all forms of violence against women and girls. The UN Trust Fund provided immediate extra support to women's rights organizations who have been the first responders to this increased violence. UN Trust Fund projects during the pandemic in 2020 have reached over 31 million people, mostly women and girls. Meanwhile, in the same year, 1,500 organizations eager to stop and end violence against women and girls applied for grants worth over $750 million. With your support, we can resource the life-changing work of civil society and women's rights organizations and deliver on the promise of leaving no woman or girl behind. Join the cause. Together we can build a safer world for women and girls.
Hello, I'm really happy to be here to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the UN Trust Fund on Violence Against Women and to congratulate the UN on the continued growth of the Trust Fund. I remember well when we were imagining the Trust Fund, and it's just phenomenal, the additional money that has come to it. So I want to celebrate that first. I think that's one of the achievements of the work on violence against women, is that the UN and governments have now begun to recognize what women and civil society put on the agenda, which is the incredible amount of violence in the world today. And I want to say that I think just the very fact that you now have 1,500 organizations around the world applying to the Trust Fund, celebrating the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, and bringing this issue to consciousness and awareness has changed the world. It has not eliminated all the violence, however, and that's why the Trust Fund must continue. But it has made it possible for many women to get out of situations of violence, to find services, to find help, and occasionally even to find legal remedies. But unfortunately, not enough women have access to those changes. And so the work of the Trust Fund must continue until all women either don't experience violence or are able at least to escape it when it does happen. So I think the Trust Fund is more important today than ever, because women have begun to recognize that they have a right to a life without violence, and that in order to exercise that right, we need government policies, we need civil society organizations that work to help the women, and we need the money and the resources that the Trust Fund has pioneered. We need more of that. We need more government will, but the Trust Fund has shown that we can get resources, and we have begun to see what are some of the processes and some of the activities that will actually prevent this violence. Because ultimately, when you look at what we just saw in the video, that violence, any violence is too much, but certainly 1 in 3 is still a figure we want to change. So support of the Trust Fund is key to helping us move to a world where civil society can support the work of women on the ground and where all women can live without violence in our culture. As women from South Asia once said, violence is not our culture. We as women, as human rights activists, as supporters and allies of women, we have the right to end the culture of violence. That is not the part of our cultures anywhere in the world that we want to celebrate or continue. So the Trust Fund, I salute you again for all you've done to help us reach this goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bunch, for highlighting the bigger picture of efforts to end violence against women and girls globally. Now, I would like to introduce you to a steadfast supporter of the UN Trust Fund, a global UN Women Goodwill Ambassador, Ms. Nicole Kidman.
So I just want to say today is the 25th anniversary of the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women. I've been involved with them for almost 2 decades now. And throughout this past couple of years, throughout the pandemic, I have still been inspired by what they're doing to help give voices to women who don't have the voice, to inspire us to give support to survivors and their resilience, and also to be able to support the continued work so that we can provide agency and support and ultimately end violence against women and girls.
Thank you, Ms. Kidman, for using your voice to amplify those of all women and girls. Now, I am very happy to introduce you to our first panel discussion. The panelists will discuss the UN Trust Fund's story from 25 years ago to the present day, and they will share their views about the future direction and place of the fund in ending violence against women ecosystem. Let's take a listen.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Cindy Clark. I'm a co-executive director at AWID, the Association for Women's Rights and Development. And I'm so thrilled and honored to be here with you all to celebrate this incredible milestone of 25 years of the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women. We want to both celebrate how far we've come and continue making a call for clear joint action that's needed to bring an end to violence against women. The UN Trust Fund has played such an important role in resourcing organizations of all sizes to end violence against women, building a body of knowledge and learning, as well as serving as champions in the field, advocating with other funders to directly support women's rights and feminist organizations. So to kick us off, I want to start out and introduce the amazing panel that we have. First, we'll hear from Roxana Carrillo, who was the first chief of the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women, and she's a member of the board of directors of Outright Action International. Then we'll hear from Sohini Bhattacharya, president and CEO of the NGO Breakthrough. Next, we have Chinyere Eyo, founder and CEO of Sexual Offenses Awareness and Response, SOAR Initiative. She will be followed by Reem Al-Salem, UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, Its Causes and Consequences. And finally, we'll hear from Aldiyana Shishik, former chief, UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women, now chief of the Multi-Stakeholder Partnerships and Advisory Services at UN Women. So thank you all for being here. It's really a pleasure to have you all here. So Roxana, I want to turn first to you. As the first chief of the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women, you are in charge of setting up the operational course of this grant-giving mechanism. What was your vision then, your hopes, your ideas, the constraints that shaped your actions 25 years ago? And as you look at the UN Trust Fund today, what's your sense of how that vision played out?
Hello, everybody. I feel incredibly proud to be here with all of you celebrating the 25th anniversary of the UN Trust Fund to Eliminate Violence Against Women. It's the transformation of the field is enormous. Of course, when we started because there was a movement behind it. There was a movement coming in from all parts of the world, you know, where they were pointing at the need to work on the issues of how we wanted to connect the issues of gender and human rights. And there was a lot of activity on the ground, uncovering the many manifestations of violence against women. That movement sort of, which had started, I mean, way back, I mean, the first initial manifestations were with the women's movement internationally, came forward at the Nairobi conference, etc. But by the time of the UN global conferences of the 90s, particularly at the World Conference on Human Rights in Vienna, you know, we had a very broad movement, a global movement that was used in the conference to challenge the human rights community to put violence against women on the agenda of the conference. That was very successful. In fact, I mean, the Declaration on Elimination of Violence Against Women, the establishment of the position of the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, and subsequent manifestations of this in the human rights system, you know, were part of that, were the result of that initiative. You move forward around the Cairo conference and then at the Beijing conference, where there was a manifestation, an enormous presence of women's organizations, you know, very much eager to challenge the UN global community on how to put forward the resources to address this issue. So it is Beijing, you know, as a corollary at that moment in 1995, that gave us the opportunity to raise the issue and to get governments to put the resources necessary to provide them to organizations that were doing the work on the ground.
So Shohini, I would love to bring you in. Roxana just spoke about, in some ways, the humble origins of the UN Trust Fund, and yet always with that clarity of the importance of the movement behind this work. So Breakthrough has been a successful grantee of the UN Trust Fund over 3 different funding cycles, and you've been a very active part of the history of the UN Trust Fund and its evolving approach to supporting feminist movements in a changing context. What has Breakthrough most valued as a grantee from the relationship with the UN Trust Fund? And what would you want other funders of ending violence against women to take away from these 25 years of experience?
Thank you, Cindy, and congratulations to UN Trust Fund for doing this for 25 years. The first thing that was so very, very important for organizations like us was the trust, the implicit trust that that UNTF had on its grantees and the grantees' ability to actually work within the framework that they had put forward. So the trust worked in such a way that innovations were allowed to kind of come in. And for Breakthrough, that was one of the things that kind of stood out. We brought in innovations, we sometimes did pilots, we sometimes then scaled up those innovations, and UNTF has stood behind us in getting those innovations in. Second thing was that, funding for the issue of violence against women and girls were not too many. And so this was one organization that brought in multi-year grants. And all of us working in this area know how important it is to have multi-year grants, to have that patient capital in order to kind of do the most important work of changing structures, but also changing cultures, which will actually, which go actually hand in hand. UNTF recognized that. For Breakthrough, it allowed also, standardization of our toolkits, of our training programs, which were so much more valuable, not just to us, but other organizations who learned from us, who then, went on to kind of use some of those toolkits and some of those trainings. UNTF was also one of the back grantors of a consortium funding that we received along with several other organizations working on gender norms and on culture change. And, all of those together actually showed that the organization was very, very true to its intent of beginning something and seeing it, end in a good way. So kind of seeing it through. The other thing that it also allowed us, we grew along with UNTF. So Breakthrough grew along with UNTF, and that was possible because as we were introducing new things to the organization or new things to the approach of dealing with violence against women and girls, UNTF actually went side by side. It helped us to really mold things around to respond to what was happening on the ground. So the trust, the ability to have multi-year grants with them, and the ability to actually have dialogues. There was a feminist framework, and we were working on one side of it, and they were working on one side of it, and there was no lack of clarity or no lack of understanding between the two. I think that was one of the fantastic things that UNTF brought to us.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Shohini. So Chinyere, I would love to invite you to come into this conversation. We heard from Shohini about Breakthrough's important experience and what they valued with the trust fund, relationships that are built on trust, multi-year support, being in dialogue. And the Sexual Offenses Awareness and Response, the SOAR initiative, is a 10-year-old small feminist organization that operates in Nigeria that's received support more recently from the UN Trust Fund. We hear from so many large funders that say, it's just too hard to directly support women's rights organizations in the global South. And yet clearly here the Trust Fund is making it happen. So we'd love to hear from you. What has your experience been working with the UN Trust Fund? What are some of the lessons that you would like other funders to take away from this experience?
Thank you so much, Cindy, and happy 25th anniversary to the UN Trust Fund. For other large funders, I would say it really starts with understanding the huge role that smaller organizations have to play, especially at the grassroots, in addressing and ending violence against women and adolescent girls, as we do over here in Nigeria. If the UN Trust Fund had not been deliberate about setting aside funding and targeting small organizations, there would have been no way that SOA initiative would have been able to benefit. So I would say start with being deliberate about targeting small organizations in the funding. And for us, we've benefited tremendously. Before the UN Trust Fund, we had really not gotten any sustainable funding at all. But from 2017, that was the first funding that we got, multi-year funding. And I must say that because of that experience, our capacity has been built. The technical support that we got was just amazing. We were built in terms of, project management. Our capacity was built in writing proposals. And because of that, we went ahead and secured 5 other multi-year funding that has sustained us, till date. And one of those funding was actually from the Global Spotlight Initiative. It's also provided for us, the platform to attend networking events to actually learn best practice, how other organizations, larger organizations, are running their programs, and also strengthen our capacity to at community mobilization, because we do a whole lot of that, addressing sociocultural and gender norms at community levels and working with girls, to understand their rights and, speak up when abuse has happened. So I would say focusing on us, giving us that opportunity, trusting that there are small organizations, credible small organizations out there, that are worth, the money and the time, is just fantastic. So I would say to all funders out there that it's important that we copy the UN Trust Fund and begin to target at smaller organizations, and they'll just be amazed at what they'll get. Thank you so much to the UN Trust Fund.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Chinyere. So we've heard a lot now about how important the UN Trust Fund has been from the perspective of grantees and the organizations working at different levels to end violence against women. Can I invite Rima Salem, if you can join us and share a bit from your perspective as a representative of an independent entity, the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, its causes and consequences. In light of the important role that we've been hearing quite a lot about of women's rights organizations and feminist movements in ending violence against women, what do you see from your perspective as the relevance and the role of the UN Trust Fund in this moment and in the larger ecosystem working to end violence against women that includes civil society, the broader UN system, member states, and others?
First of all, Cindy, I want to say it's a real pleasure to be joining you for this important anniversary. As we heard from Roxana, my mandate did contribute and had a vested interest in the conception of this initiative. And of course, there's a big relevance to this initiative. I would say in the comprehensive approach that it adopts, it looks at all the elements that are needed for a good intervention. So legal framework, prevention, the response angle, focuses on data and how data is used and the quality of data on violence against women, which is an issue that my mandate has also repeatedly drawn attention to. And I hope that this focus can continue. Then, of course, there's the issue that it engaged all relevant stakeholders, so not just governments, but really communities, the private sectors, NGOs, the UN, and also not to mention that it's injected sizable resources at a scale that can really make a difference, which is often a challenge, as we know, with interventions aiming to combat GBV. I also think that it correctly and strategically links itself to the 2030 agenda. As you know, the SDG 4 and SDG 5 states commit themselves to achieving gender equality and empowerment, as well as to ending all forms of violence against women. And this is important because it focuses on adopting an all-society approach to ending GBV, since it affects all of society and all societies without exception. And it's a way of saying that unless we deal with GBV and put an end to it, nations and countries cannot achieve prosperity. So that said, one of the biggest strengths, I think, of the Trust Fund is its vital contributions and support to civil society, particularly women-led organizations and human rights defenders. And it's important that the Trust Fund continues to focus on these, especially given the climate of pushback against gender equality. And so the role of these actors must be protected zealously, and the space that they have also to do their work must be protected. Especially also that we know that in the context of the COVID pandemic, many civil society organizations have been affected, had to shut down, had lost funding. And again, this is something my mandate has expressed concern about. So I'm very happy to see actually that that the Trust Fund has actually adopted measures to continue to support grassroots organizations and NGOs. Of course, given the size and comprehensive vision of the initiative, it should continue to take on a daring, innovative, and long-term approach to interventions, particularly to address underlying causes such as social norms, and to invest in meaningful ways of engaging men and boys, since it has that luxury of looking really at the long term. And finally, I would say that there is ample room for synergies between us. So the International Human Rights Mechanism can certainly make good use of the trend analysis that the UN Trust Fund generates to inform ourselves of the progress in ending GBV and also of the outstanding challenges. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those reflections. And now I'm thrilled to hear from Aldiana as the most recent chief of the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women. And as you're taking on your new role in UN Women, what do you make of these impressions and the thoughts that have been shared by women who've actively contributed to the UN Trust Fund's mission over these 25 years? What lessons from the past have you incorporated in your management of the fund? And where do you think you're leaving the fund off to next?
Thank you so much, Cindy. And please let me start by thanking UN Trust Fund team for inviting me, because I'm all 10 days out of the Trust Fund and in my new role. So it feels a little bit this like in-between zone that I'm right now, but and congratulations on the 25th anniversary, of course. But let me start also by saying what an honor and privilege and responsibility was and is to be standing on the shoulders of everyone who have created the UN Trust Fund, from what was, as Roxana described, just a single idea created by movements, around the World Conference and around Beijing Platform for Action in Beijing, and then became this fund later, 25 years later, as we know it today. So standing, on their shoulders and everything that has been done subsequently was what was always leading our thinking in the Trust Fund. Alongside is also, responsibility and privilege to work with everybody who is right now walking on the same path towards ending violence against women and girls. Every single organization, every single individual, a small, large, medium, that is working to achieve the same goal that the UN Trust Fund is working right now. So, just listening to what Shohini says about side-by-side trust dialogue, and then Chinyere saying, Trust Fund believing in the small organizations, what they can do, trusting in the process, multi-year funding, technical support, networking, exposure. These are the words that, fill my heart and make me think that the Trust Fund has listened and has accomplished its mission to listen, and not just listen, but hear what organizations and what people are saying about this enormous work on violence against women and girls. So, these words and then history of the Trust Fund for 25 years confirm just over and over again what we all working on this issue are saying, and what women's rights organizations have been saying for years and years, that when trusted and equal partnerships that bring knowledge and skills and resources together are created, the sustainable change is created. Yeah, the progress happens, the needle is moved, the world changes for better. So everybody has a role, specific role in that partnerships. So this is why I believe listening and hearing and learning from the past experiences from everybody is the backbone that we carve together as the UN Trust Fund's modus operandi. And I believe in that context, this is, becomes clear that roles we play in our collective actions, then importance of funding for civil society, particularly women's rights organizations, are the key solutions to create these differences. And, in terms of the belief and the new strategic plan, I just think that, co-created with all partners of the Trust Fund, it sets new direction that has a clear promise of a new generation of achievements. And it, as it will be implemented in the same manner with an amazing UN Trust Fund team that has been there for years, and all of the partners that have created this new vision, that as I leave, it continues. I have no doubt that we will see very specific changes in the next 5 years.
Great. Thank you so much, Adriana. So while I have you, I would like to take us to a final question that is for everyone on the panel. The challenge is that we're asking you to respond in one sentence. And so while this has been a conversation and a celebration of how far we've come and the progress to date, we know we're in a context of multiple crises, and there's a concerning rise of violence against women. So what would you distill as your recommendation for the UN Trust Fund and the broader ecosystem working to end violence against women for the decade of action? What can we do to accelerate progress toward the achievement of SDG 5 and ending violence against women-related targets by 2030? Aldiana, as we left with you, I will come back and ask you for your thoughts. One sentence, please.
Wow, how many hours I have for this one sentence? Okay, let me, in one sentence, well, I more have a message to the Trust Fund, really, as I leave now. I guess what I leave to them as my key message would be, continue to listen to all of your partners and to raise the bar with every answer to your own question. That's my final message to them.
Thank you so much. Reem, may I ask you?
I'm also going to go for a long sentence. I would say to keep in mind having a strong survivor-centered approach in all the future interventions, align with survivor needs and community-led programming, and maybe given the challenges also to link the Trust Fund's initiatives more firmly and more solidly to the international human rights frameworks and instruments.
Thank you. Chinyere?
Okay, so Aldiana stole the words from my mouth. Continue to listen. So I would say continue to focus on prevention. From my context, prevention is about changing sociocultural norms and gender practices that continue to enable and allow violence against women to be perpetrated. Thank you.
Thank you. Shahini?
I'd say let's bring in systems change thinking into this space. We really need to think, what can we change in order to make prevention a priority for everybody, not just for people working in this sector. And for that, of course, we need resources. So patient, core, long-term, flexible resources from everybody, and not just UNTF, for everyone across, and finding spaces of convergence across issues and sectors so that we can build an accountability for everybody to respond to, and not just human rights workers or NGOs or others. So that's it.
Thank you. And for the last word, Roxana, I would love to hear your reflections and recommendation to the Trust Fund going forward.
Can I copy all of them? I think we have learned a lot in these 25 years, from the creation of the Trust Fund. A lot of that had been said during the panel. And we have learned a lot in the last couple of years about dealing with pandemics. Violence against women is a pandemic. And we are seeing the new variants, that are threatening the life of women. whether they are in the context of the actual COVID-19, to the persistence of violence in the context of war, and we're seeing what's happening with women in Afghanistan, to just highlight one example, to the new forms of violence against women, such as the ones spotlighted just last week on the effect of social media, on how it damages the lives and self-image of young women. All of them are manifestations of violence. And we need to work together, use all the tools we have, and trust and listen to women, because they are our guiding post.
Thank you so much to you all. It's really been such an honor to be in the conversation with all of you. And there's a clear message about continuing the work forward together. So we look forward to the ongoing work ahead. Thank you.
What a remarkable discussion that was. As several panelists mentioned, working with partners to achieve our shared goals is absolutely critical. The UN member states established the UN Trust Fund 25 years ago precisely to create a mechanism where governments, private sector partners, and individuals around the world can join forces to support life-changing work of women's organizations. Now we'll hear from representatives of the governments of Sweden, Australia, Ireland, the Netherlands, and Norway.
The Swedish government recognizes that supporting civil society and women's rights organizations is crucial to protect women and girls, to transform norms, and to push progressive work for gender equality. The fund's work is crucial. We see a global pandemic of violence against women and girls, and we know that supporting civil society and women's rights organizations is absolutely vital to end violence. The fact that the UN Trust Fund to Ending Violence Against Women and Girls has established a mechanism that enables effective funding hand in hand with capacity building, broad learning, and a sharing network is a great achievement. For Sweden, the partnership with the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women is evidence-based outreach to change norms and save lives.
Ending violence against women and girls is a priority for Australia, domestically and internationally. Today, we mark the 25th anniversary for the United Nations Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women. This fund plays a unique role bringing together governments, women's rights organisations and civil society to prevent and respond to violence against women and girls. This effort is more vital than ever as we respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and work together to build a future free of gender-based violence in the Indo-Pacific.
Dear friends, I'm delighted to join the celebration to mark 25 years since the establishment of the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women. Ireland works to ensure that an understanding of violence against women and girls and the measures needed to address and prevent it is central to all our work. Over 25 years, the UN Trust Fund has worked to build the resilience and sustainability of grassroots women's and other civil society organisations. We know that this approach has real impact on ending gender-based violence and ensures that prevention and services are tailored to local needs. Ireland is proud to have partnered with the UN Trust Fund for 15 years. The results speak for themselves. In the last 5 years alone, the fund has worked in over 70 countries and territories, reaching over 50 million people. For Ireland, the partnership with the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women is an important part of our determination to end gender-based violence. Its achievements shine a light on vital issues and show the importance of supporting women and women-led organisations to act as agents of positive change.
As its oldest and largest donor, the Netherlands warmly congratulates the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women on its 25th anniversary. We are proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Trust Fund in supporting women's rights organizations and feminist movements, engaging men as well as boys, and involving local and religious communities to achieve structural change and substantially improve the livelihoods of women and girls around the world. COVID-19 has had a major impact on women and girls. Sexual and gender-based violence are more pervasive than before the pandemic, and this shows that there is still a lot of work to be done. The Netherlands remains fully committed to the Trust Fund's mandate, and we will continue to stand by your side every step of the way.
For Norway, the partnership with the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women is extremely important. Norad, the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, has always supported civil society's engagement in development cooperation, including efforts to end gender-based violence. One specific aspect that's critical is access to practitioner-based knowledge. And it's important that this is locally based, with women leading the organizations, to prevent and respond to violence against the most marginalized girls and women. We've seen their growing importance in responding to violence during the pandemic, and the fund is essential to facilitating the knowledge and contributions of these local actors into robust cross-sectoral efforts at scale.
The song we just heard is entitled I Choose to Say No, and it was written and performed by students and young activists from the UN Trust Fund supported projects run by the Autonomous Women's Center in Serbia. Vital work such as this must be sustained. And that's why investing in long-term and sustainable funding is a key cornerstone of the UN Trust Fund's recently released strategic plan of 2021 to 2025. Our next panel will explore these themes in detail.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gemma Wood. I'm the Monitoring, Evaluation and Knowledge Manager at the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women. And I'm very pleased to moderate the second panel of the 25th anniversary event. And the focus of this panel is long-term funding of partnership as critical aspects of ending violence against women and leaving no one behind. Over the 25 years of the UN Trust Fund, we have been very lucky to partner with women's rights organizations more than once. And we've seen the impact that long-term funding beyond 3 years, sometimes as far as 6 years, has had on sustainable impact on violence against women. So I'm very pleased that we have a panel of 4 wonderful people representing women's rights organizations around the world who will speak to us today about the importance of long-term funding of partnership. These panelists are Ms. Natsnet Jabriderhan, Violence Against Women Prevention Coordinator for Raising Voices, based in Uganda. We have Ms. Jaya Luntal, co-founder and president of Story Kitchen, Nepal. Ms. Kate Flatley, executive director of the Women's Justice Initiative in Guatemala, and Ms. Weasel Abdullah, program coordinator of the Arab Women's Organization of Jordan. So I will be sharing a little information about each of these fantastic organizations and their contribution to ending violence against women and posing some questions for them to respond. So thank you. So the very first one is Ms. Natsnet Jabriderhan. So welcome, Natsnet. Natsnet is from the organization Raising Voices, based in Uganda. And Raising Voices is a women's organization that has been very influential through the patented methodology, SASA, which has become a good model and best practice in prevention of violence against women through community mobilization. This methodology has been scaled up now in more than 60 countries and tested in various contexts. And we have been very pleased in the Trust Fund to be able to fund them twice, once for developing the methodology and secondly for testing and rolling out the methodology in different contexts. So Natsnet, my question for you is, what was the UN's Trust Fund's contribution to the process of developing the SASA methodology and its success? And what has the contribution of 2 rounds of funding from the UN Trust Fund contributed to Raising Voices over the years? Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. We celebrate UNTF because it has been part of the SASA journey since 2010. And in 2010, with support from UN Trust Fund, we were able to scale SASA in the Eastern Africa region. And it was quite a key milestone in SASA life. And then again in 2016, we had another cycle of funding that has enabled us to explore this question of like, how is SASA being adapted across the different contexts? So we looked at rural setting, beyond Africa and humanitarian setting. And we were able to document some good lessons and learning, and that has taken shape in case studies as well as program guide. And all those products were translated into various languages, including English, French, and Spanish. I would mention Spanish, like the materials and documents and all the tools from Spanish are now really key in the work that we are doing currently in the Latin America, like Central America and Mexico. We are setting up a new cohort for SASA together, and those tools are becoming handy. And I just also want to highlight the kind of relationship we have with UN Trust Fund. It is not limited to a project kind of framed relationship. For example, currently we are collaborating in broader vow prevention issues, including practice-based knowledge. And we feel the two cycles have established a good relationship, productive relationship, as raising voices as grantee and UN Trust Fund as a donor. But the kind of relationship we have has been long-term, beyond project life. And it's about also taking the kind of the lessons from the project and then elevate the knowledge and push the agendas at a broader scale. So I feel like it has been very productive. We are very pleased to continue collaborating with the UN Trust Fund.
Thank you so much, Natsnet. And we want to say a huge thank you to Raising Voices, who has been a huge inspiration to us also, and to many civil society and other organizations around the world. Your innovative methodology is now being scaled up by UN agencies and other civil society organizations. And every day we learn from you in terms of how to take a truly feminist approach to the process of violence against women. So thank you, Natsnet, so much. So now I'm going to turn to our second panelist, Jaya Nandal, who works for Story Kitchen, is the co-founder of Story Kitchen based in Nepal. And Story Kitchen was a small women's rights organization who empowered and supported the agency of survivors of sexual violence through training them as justice reporters to share their stories and to support the healing and empowerment process after survival of violence. So Jaya knows the power of words and the sense of women's solidarity and how important that is for transformation. And we've been so pleased to see that the small grant that we gave to Story Kitchen helped you as an organization roll out this approach. And then we saw that you were able to get scaled up and supported by UN Women and scaled up more at a national level through the support that we provided. And also we had wonderful lessons learned through support to you on how to deal with crisis, because the devastating earthquake hit in Nepal in 2015. So we supported you through that process. So please, Jaya, over to you. Would love to hear about what you think of the long-term partnership and what were the ingredients to this success. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jima. And I would like to thank UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women for creating this space to share our learning and also to help us amplify our learning from the ground. When I think about the journey that started with UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women, it started actually from 2014 when we were writing the concept note, and we all know it is a rigorous process. The formal partnership started from 2015, and at that time, the Story Kitchen, it was the first time we received, that grant. But for UN Trust Fund, it started the small grant for the first time, and we started our work from that small grant. It was for 3 years, and we started from $80,910 US. I still remember the amount as well. But that amount was really a huge amount for us because the work that we wanted to do, we had a big dream, we had a vision. I'm talking about like 7 years back. And we feel that UN Trust Fund did have trust on us and our vision at that time. We felt that what we were trying to say was understood by the UN Trust Fund, and UN Trust Fund provided support to us to try this new idea and to serve the women who were silenced by the state and the society and by the family. And since 2015, there have been other support as well. For example, governance facility and UN Women Nepal for 2 years, and GIZ Civil Peace Service. And lately, we are still like working on the same idea, but with expanded outcome, with the support from European Union delegation in Nepal. And this is how we have now covered 18 districts from all 7 provinces of Nepal. But when we started with the UN Trust Fund support, it was only 5 districts, and they were from 3 provinces of Nepal. So you can see how we have, reached out to other women who are the survivors of Nepal's 10 years long armed conflict. And there has been a lot of greater impact in the lives of women. Mostly they have become organized. That is what we envisioned for, because we used storytelling as one of the major tool and approach, and we used women to women and survivor to survivor approach as a justice reporter. So we have trained 18. We are working now in 18 districts of Nepal, and 38 women survivors trained as justice reporters, and 2,000 plus audio stories have been gathered and directly engaged with 500 plus women. And they are organized at the national level as National Network of Women Survivors of Armed Conflict, and also at the district level. And the most important thing is they have made their voice collective, and they are now together to fight for justice, and they are also working in the prevention of violence against women in Nepal. So this is a proud moment for us, and thank you UN Trust Fund for trusting us. And there are many ingredients, as Gemma asked, and one is trust, another is passion, third is integrity, fourth is mentorship and guidance from UN Trust Fund, and recognition and amplification of our work that we are doing on the ground. So these are the ingredients, Gemma. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jaya. That's a wonderful story. And thank you for your trust also in us as a funder to help you in this amazing story. And wonderful to hear about the success and the scaling up of the project to 18 districts. And we will continue to be a strong advocate for your organization. So thank you so much, Jaya.
Thank you.
And next we'll turn to Kate Flatley. So Miss Kate Flatley is the executive director, as I said, of Women's Justice Initiative in Guatemala. And this feminist organization supports Mayan women in remote rural communities in Guatemala. Women's Justice Initiative received 2 rounds of funding so far from the UN Trust Fund, initially to pilot the project, and then to scale up their approach in reaching more women left behind, potentially left behind, particularly in the context of COVID-19 and the pandemic. So Kate, we'd love to hear from you on what your key lessons are on the connection between the funding duration, the longer term funding, and the results you can deliver, and the relationship between us as a donor and yourselves. Thank you so much, Kate.
Thanks, Gemma. I want to start by thanking the Trust Fund for the invitation to participate in this panel. It's an honor to be here with all of you and to celebrate UNTF's 25th anniversary. So in your response to your question, Gemma, I'd say the most significant lesson that we've learned is that funding duration directly impacts our ability to innovate and to adapt to changing contexts. Ultimately, as an organization, when we take risks, adapt our programming, and respond to needs identified by program participants, we end up being a more effective organization and we achieve greater results. And, as an organization, we find that we're more creative and more willing to take risks and pilot new adaptations with our long-term funding partners. Ultimately, our greatest responsibility is to the women and girls we serve, and we have to consider how we will sustain our work with them beyond just 1 to 2 years. As an example, as part of our current partnership with UNTF, we're piloting community radio programs to engage men and boys and broader communities to prevent violence against women and girls and build healthy relationships. And this programming was really identified as a need from women who were participating in our programs in the past. I think if it weren't for the Trust Fund's multi-year partnership, we likely would not have taken on the risk of implementing this new approach. And, as a second lesson learned, I think is really around trust. And what we've learned is that in order to achieve results, we must first take the time and provide the space to build trusting relationships with our program participants. A major piece of our work focuses on mobilizing program participants to become agents of change in their communities in order to prevent violence against women. These women, who we call community advocates, take on a leadership role and a lot of responsibility in their communities. And with this responsibility comes risk. They can be criticized by their peers or family members. Some of them receive threats for their work. And what we've learned is that advocates are really committed and willing to take on this challenging work, in part because WJI has earned their trust. The long-term support of the Trust Fund over 6 years has been critical in our ability to pilot, adapt, and now scale up this approach in our work with the community advocates. And what we've realized is it's really these multi-year commitments and the trust from funding partners that has allowed us to support the advocates over a longer period of time and to truly earn their trust. And so with that, they in turn then can earn the trust and support women in their communities and ultimately be more successful in their work in preventing violence against women and girls.
Thank you so much, Kate. And thank you for all the work that you do and the work of the women's rights advocates and gender advocates. And that's a wonderful reminder of the importance of long-term funding to support these people who are on the ground, putting their lives at risk every day to put in place this essential work. And that's why this long-term partnerships and funding is so essential. We can't be here for the short haul, not when this is such a pervasive problem. So thank you so much, Kate. And now we'll turn to our last panelist. Last but not least, Ms. Weasel Abdullah, who is the program coordinator for the Arab Women's Organization of Jordan. And the Arab Women Organization works with Syrian refugees and internally displaced women and girls, as well as the host communities, through survivor-centered services to prevent and tackle violence against women. The Arab Women's Organization has received 2 rounds of funding for the Trust Fund, one through our humanitarian window at the peak of the Syrian conflict-related forced displacements, and then now later to support the intersection of the pandemic, COVID-19, and its impact on violence against women. So Weasel, over to you. What has this funding enabled your organization to do for women and girls in your communities? Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. First, I want to thank you for this opportunity to be part of the 25th anniversary celebration of the UN Trust Fund. Actually, the fund from the UN Trust Fund enabled AWO to first have and establish safe spaces for women and girls in host communities where women and girls can go to get benefit from the services and other activities that held and conducted there. In these safe spaces, AWO provides case management, psychosocial support, awareness raising, and life skills trainings. So women and girls start to report more on violence that they face, and also to build their trust again by having them in the group therapy, psychosocial support activities, and also being internally referred to the vocational training activities that we have in our centers. For our first project with the UN Trust Fund, it was for 2 years, and we work on not only on women and girls, we work on male engagement. We work on men and boys, and in the aspect of alternative masculinities. We had sessions for men and boys to change their perceptions towards gender-based violence and violence against women and girls. After that, we have like a break between the two funds, and having those centers and safe spaces for women and girls enabled AWO to secure more funds on combating violence against women and girls and GBV. During the past 2 years, we worked with 2 other donors in the same safe spaces that we have, also on case management and psychosocial support. Also, and during these 2 years, we tried to collect as much as data as we can of data to build our new project with the UN Trust Fund, so we can have new approaches and new methodologies to implement these activities. So we started with new, we had the intersectionality of violence as a main approach in our new project. And also we changed the awareness raising into community mobilization and community organizing approach to get benefit from the power of people to change the perceptions. One more thing is related to the domestic violence, because in Jordan we have a raise in domestic violence due to COVID-19 pandemic. So we're now working on advocating for changing the law of family protection in Jordan. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and such an important point to end on, because changing legislation takes time. And we're so grateful that we've been able to support you in this journey and to continue to get that level that you're now working at, being able to support and change legislation to protect more women and reach more women across the whole country. And your project also shows the importance of being there through protracted crisis. We know protracted crises do not last 1 year. So projects cannot last 1 year. We, all donors and all those who are working on ending violence against women, we have to be there 100% for the long term. So thank you so much to all of you. It's been wonderful to hear from you and the success of your projects and your continuing passion and commitment. So now we're going to turn to a few last words of the panel. And I'm going to ask each one of you to just give us in a couple of words your impressions or your basically call to action to the donor community. With and based on your experience on the Trust Fund, what is the one thing that you would like to see in the donor grantee, the donor civil society relationship? What would you like to see more of? Or to put in other words, what would be your few words of advice for how donors should interact and have a relationship to civil society organizations such as yourself? So in order of the panel, I will now turn to Natsnet to give us a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. My 2 words would be long-term and flexible. And if you can allow me to go beyond, a kind of a 2-way street, then a 1-way kind of direct, I say and I do kind of relationship. So yeah, balanced power, flexible, and long-term relationship.
Thank you, Natsnet. Jaya.
Multi-year, longer-term funding and replication grant, along with valuing the partnership, the value of partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Kate?
So I'll echo what's been said. Long-term partnerships, I think, that are based on trust and flexible support.
Thank you. And Weizao?
Adding to the 3 points, support the pushback against the shrinking space.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you, such important messages. And to conclude, we're so grateful to you. We're grateful for this solidarity between us. And we're grateful for the long-term partnership you've had with us and the trust that you've put into the UN Trust Fund. And long may this continue. We don't want violence of women against women to continue for another 25 years, but we're very grateful that we have this partnership and solidarity, which long may it continue. So thank you so much. And that will conclude this panel. Thank you.
Trust, multi-year funding, flexibility for adaptations, core resources for organizational resilience. Yes, thank you for those key messages and guidance on how to make change possible. We are greatly encouraged by actions and continuous leadership of governments committed to these principles. They continue to spearhead the change in the international community. Let's hear now from representatives from the governments of Canada, the United Kingdom, and Switzerland.
For us as Canadians, preventing and responding to all forms of sexual and gender-based violence and any harmful practices, especially for women and girls, is a priority for us. And we're very proud to support the important work of the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women. It's a really critical initiative for us. And what's especially important is that the Trust Fund is really working with grassroots organizations to make a difference. We really believe that building up the strength, the resilience of women-led organizations is going to make all the difference in the work of the fund. And that's why we're so pleased to be able to support it. We're dealing with an increase in the risk and dangers because of COVID, because of the shadow that's been created by COVID and the difficulties that women are facing. And we think of the work of the Trust Fund as even more important now than ever. I want to congratulate the fund on its 25th anniversary, and just to say that for us, supporting the UN Trust Fund to end violence against women is in fact a model for supporting women's rights organizations around the world. Thank you so much.
Local women's rights organisations are critical to preventing and eradicating gender-based violence. That's why we invest in the UN Trust Fund to end violence against women. The fund supports local organisations to deliver their own strategies to prevent and end violence against women and girls. For the United Kingdom, the partnership with the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women is about stopping violence before it starts.
Switzerland considers the Trust Fund as a catalytic mechanism to achieve a violence-free world for women and girls. The fund's approach is aligned with our focus on reaching those most in need and on strengthening locally owned systems. This includes civil society actors who play an important role in Switzerland's long-standing engagement on gender equality. The fight against gender-based violence requires everybody's contribution. We remain committed to being a strong partner in this collective endeavour. For Switzerland, the partnership with the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women is systemic, transformative and results-focused.
With multiple crises, whether caused by humans or nature, leading to disturbing increases of violence against women and girls, we know that we need to act now. So as we listen to the Brazilian women's rights activist Suene dos Santos Nogueira, let's heed her call to continue working together for a brighter future for women and girls.
Meu nome é Suene, eu moro no Rio de Janeiro e eu fiz parte de um dos projetos apoiados pela ONU Mulheres, na CANTRA, na Casa da Mulher Trabalhadora. E para mim esse projeto foi muito importante para mim poder entender melhor sobre os meus direitos, sobre principalmente a luta e a defesa dos direitos das mulheres aqui no Rio. E eu agradeço muito a ONU por apoiar essas iniciativas, porque é muito importante a gente, enquanto mulheres, principalmente negras e feministas, ter apoio para a gente poder lutar diariamente contra essas violências que a gente vivencia. E é muito importante esse apoio. Muito obrigada.
That brings us to the conclusion of our event today, commemorating 25 years of life-changing work by the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women. Remember, we all have a role to play, and I've encouraged my community to support the UN Trust Fund through its Give 25 for UNTF 25 campaign, and I hope you'll join me by doing the same. Be sure to follow the UN Trust Fund social media to find out how you, wherever you are, can get involved and take action. And finally, please join me in wishing a very happy birthday to the UN Trust Fund.
Happy birthday!
We are happy to be your grantees. The work we are doing is immense. So happy birthday, that you have many, many more birthdays and look into more partnerships and interactions with you. Happy birthday.
We wish you many more years of success in working to support women and girls around the world.
Together we will continue protecting women and girls from gender-based violence.
Thank you so much for all the support. Et que la lutte continue et qu'on arrive bientôt à un monde sans violence et avec l'égalité entre les femmes et les hommes.
You are so valued and cherished, and I hope you continue to grow and support us all.
We are happy with the work that you're doing to support us and so many women across the world. We wish you the very best as you continue with this noble cause, and we look to better days ahead together with you. Thank you.
Muchas felicidades.
Thank you for your vision and support to women around the world.